Okay, so last episode we managed to snap off a stud from the bottom of the fork on the other side. I've shot down the road on Desmo Dave, my Ducati, and visited the nut and bolt shop. Wasn't happy with what they were providing, so I went to an exhaust shop, and I think I found something that'll do the job, and we now need to get on and fix it. G'day everybody and welcome back. We need to deal with that broken stud, and in fact we need to put a whole new set in. These ones on this side have obviously been broken at some stage or gone walkabout, and they've been replaced with bolts. I wasn't comfortable with that right from day one. I mentioned it in a couple of videos, but because there was bolts on one side and studs on the other, I had to confirm what was actually supposed to be there, and I had a look on the parts list and it's meant to be studs. It's always dangerous, particularly with something that's as critical as holding your front axle in, to be screwing a bolt into an aluminium casting and putting any sort of load on it, because there's just so many stresses involved in when you torsion, the torsional stresses, plus you're trying to pull at the same time. The way threads work is that they're a binding, threads are binding threads, so they're actually only touching on one side and they're void on the other. And you only need one thread to be a little bit out of kilter because of some damage or something, and it'll pull that thread, and then you just end up ripping the lot out. You'll strip out an aluminium casting or an aluminium component far easier than you will strip a stud. So it's always a much stronger application to fit a stud and then put a nut on it, rather than screwing and putting all that load on the aluminium casting. So these two are already gone, obviously. I had to remove the one that was on the other side that broke, so I could go down the shop and make sure I got the right length. And that just leaves us with one to go, so we'll get him out now and get about putting it all back together. Right, now these things are Loctited in, as they should be, but it means that they can be a bit of a bugger to get out. What is required is the application of heat, but I don't want to get it that hot that we compromise any seals, for example. But Loctite lets go when it gets hot, so you have to do that. And while you can, if you've got an oxy set or something that can actually generate a bit of heat, concentrate a bit of heat, I would, if I had an oxy here, I would be heating the stud and getting the heat in it very, very quickly. And melt the Loctite and then undo it so that it doesn't soak up into the aluminium housing too much. But we don't have that. We don't have that luxury. So just locking the two nuts together on here. I'll just try and move it without heat. Nah, not going to happen. I don't want to snap that one as well. All I've got is this little gas torch. Just want to put a bit of heat around where the stud goes up into the... burning a bit of grease off. I think that's already moving. Yep, it's moving. So that Loctite, yeah, that Loctite just lets go when it gets hot. Excellent. I don't have any Loctite primer here. I've got some at work, but none here. So I'm just going to run a tap up through to make sure that we've cleaned out all of the Loctite. All the threads are clean and ready to accept Loctite. Right, I've done that to all four now. I'm just going to squirt a little bit of brake and part cleaner up in there. Blow them out with a bit of air. So these studs I got from an exhaust shop, a local exhaust shop. Just going to wind a nut on, put on a drop of super stud lock, and wind him home. Before that Loctite has a chance to set properly, I'll just very quickly make sure that, yep, we're going to be able to, we're not going to bottom the nut out before we actually apply clamping force. Okay, so let's just rinse and repeat times 4. If you're a regular to this channel, you would have heard me say in the past that you shouldn't touch the tip on the steel, on the nib of your Loctite bottle, because it contact with steel and then the absence of air are the catalyst, and you will, when you put your lid back on, it's now been in contact with the catalyst. Now it's in the absence of air, it goes hard in the tip. I put the caps back on while I was down the road. I got new spring washers, new nuts, new flat washers. So we are golden. Right, happy with that. Other side. Rightio, I have tensioned this axle nut up. And I've lined it up ready to put a split pin in, but I don't have a split pin. I'm going to have to get one. I have also, if you remember, we had a strip, or someone had put a wood screw, broken off bolt in here, and they'd put a wood screw in. We recovered that and put a helicoil. I've fitted that distribution block for the front brakes, because now we need to put the front brakes on. So I'll take our new Hell hoses and fittings. It looks very cool. I presume one of these will be a different length to the others. And it is. So let's assume the longest one has to go up to the handlebar. The other two will go down to the calipers. New banjo fitting and new copper wash hair. Just going to leave them finger tight for now until I figure it all out. Now this side, it will need, it's got a double length banjo bolt. So we'll have one copper washer, two copper washers, and three copper washers. That ain't right because there's a relief in the top there. So obviously I've got those hoses bass ackward. So I must go through the one down to the caliper first. That's about. And again, let's just finger tight for now. I'll move up to the, oh, see, this is really long up here. Why is that so long? Bloody thing goes for days. So the factory ones, the two going down to the calipers are the same length, and the one going up to the top is actually shorter than the others. So for whatever reason, this held kit has been provided with a brake line that's too long. And I've also noted that the ones going down to the calipers have the angled banjo at the top. So we'll swap them round. It's obviously to direct the hose away from the tyre instead of driving it straight down into it. I was one copper washer short on that side anyway. Why didn't you tell me that? Rely on you guys. Alright, so what to do now? What I think I'll do is route this maybe from the other side to try and let's have a look here. No, that's not good. Too big an angle on the hose. I don't want to hurt it. That'll work. And I'll just kind of route him around into here. Oh well, I guess the fact is that the whole lot turns as an assembly, so you're not worried. I'm not worried about it getting caught on anything. It's not ideal, but it is what it is. Still going to leave those finger tight. Calipers, I'm not putting the pads in yet because I want to bleed them first. And they'll mount here. Yep, that'll be right. Are these going to be long enough? Yes. finger tight, put a bolt in the top. Okay, that guy there is meant to go back there. That makes sense. Brake hoses are currently sitting in position. So I'll just go around now and just nip these. Make sure that I'm happy with them all. Yep, I think that'll be okay. Alright, good enough for the girls I go out with. Okay, so now I want to put some juice in it. Now the reason why I didn't put the pads in yet, and the reason why I only put these on with minimum force, you can do yourself a big favour and bleed your calipers with the pistons all the way back. So rather than having to displace all that air with oil behind the piston, you use the piston to displace all the air and leave a minimum amount of room in there. So I'm just going to hold in place with these clamps. Hopefully they'll be strong enough. We're going from bone dry. Now there's a couple of ways we could do this. We could fill it at the top, crack a bleed nipple at the bottom and let gravity take its course, and then try and get the master cylinder primed and get the fluid moving. Or we can cheat, which I like to do, and use a bleeding tool. So this one here I've had for a while. It can either be a pump. It'll either pump out or pump in. So it'll either draw a negative pressure or it'll push out a positive pressure. I've currently got it set to pump out. I've got fluid in this little container, and I'm going to plug that onto the one nipple I have released. Have I released? Where's my 8mm Spaniard? It's normally the 10mm you're looking for. No, I haven't released it. I just better check these nipples. Yes. Right, so they're right. So the far side one is nipped up and this one is loose. I'm going to place the adapter onto the nipple, and I'm going to give it a few pumps and bring the oil up probably to about here somewhere, and then I will connect the other side and pump it up all the way to the master cylinder. That's the plan. Wish me luck. I might just pop up there. I don't want to overfill it, and I can't see much from here. Now we have a freaking great mess. Bugger, I've got brake fluid everywhere. Ah! Avenge my death. Clear my browser history. Well, that went to hell in a handbasket really, really quickly. And I owe everybody an apology and an explanation. So you saw what happened with that first caliper. Then I turned the cameras off to clean up all the mess, and I went and hooked up the other caliper off camera, And I did exactly the same thing, made a bloody great mess again. And the reason for that was that that pump type bleed system, while they work very well, the way they work is that you're pressurising that little container, and the oil travels up through under pressure, up through the system, and it's reliant on whatever is the greatest restriction in that system, and usually it's the bleed nipple that you haven't opened far enough or whatever. And it's not intuitive. So when you're sitting there looking at it and you're pumping it, of course you're only building pressure in the container, but instinctively you're thinking that it's like a hydraulic system, and when you pull the lever you get a one-to-one reaction, and of course you don't. So you sit there pumping, looking at the oil going through the tube, and all you're doing is building pressure, building pressure, building pressure, and then blow the bloody thing off. Once you've got pressure, you should just leave it until it comes back down again. And that's the mistake I made, because I don't use it every day. So then I cleaned up that mess, and by that stage I'd had enough. And I put the bikes away, packed everything up. And we even had tea that night, and then my wife said, I thought you wanted to go for a ride tomorrow, which is today. And yeah, I do. So I sort of came back to it, working in around the other bikes. Those plastic clamps were too flexible, and that I put on the calipers. So I swapped them out for some steel sash clamps, and they held the pistons nice and tight, and I was able to get that was a vast improvement. At this stage I already had oil up to the master cylinder, so I just topped it up. I bled the brakes conventionally, just pump them up, crack the bleed nipple, pump them up, crack the bleed nipple, and I had a hose going into an ice cream bucket. And then once I had the system bled and everything was working, I then went the next step, and I put the brake pads back in the calipers, and I mounted the calipers on the bike. So now we've got brakes happening, and they're good. But good for me because I get to go for a ride today. Not so good for you guys, I guess, because I skipped all that. It was either pull everything back out and set cameras up and go again, or do it today and miss out going on a ride. So, sorry guys. I mean, it's my channel. If you're that passionate about watching brake pads go in, there's plenty of videos on YouTube on how to do that. And I guess the truth is that I struggle just as much as everybody with this type of thing, where where you come across an issue with bleeding brakes, because they can be a pain in the neck. But you know, at the end of the day, it wasn't that big a drama on this particular bike. They all bled up pretty nicely. What I have done though is I rerouted that hose from the top over to the other side. I switched everything around on the block. There's enough. This is threaded right through, and the thread is equal lengths anyway on both sides, on both of these banjo fittings. So I just reversed it and put it on that side, and that took a lot of the really sharp angle that I had on the hose. I wasn't happy with it. So yeah, at the end of the day, I've swapped the hoses over to that side, successfully bled the system, reassembled the caliper with the pads in them, but mounted them on the bike. That's it. Now, while I've got your attention, I just want to cover off I just want to respond to a couple of questions, or a couple of comments, I should say, in the comments section for the last video. I want to preface it by saying that this is not a restoration. We are not restoring this bike. We are not customising this bike. We are not modifying this bike. We are, all this is a resurrection. So it had been sat for 30 years or 20 years, whatever it was, hadn't run. I wanted to be able to hand build a bike that was safe. That's what this component is, I guess, now. Haven't fitted new wheel bearings yet, but they've been ordered. They just haven't arrived yet. This wheel's got to come back out. needs new tyres, front and rear, new wheel bearings. So I just wanted to get the suspension and the brakes happening because, one, there were no brakes, and two, that first time I rode it, the road test, it was diving and carrying on something fierce, so I knew there was something not right with this front end. So that's sorted now, that's great. But if you're looking for a nut and bolt detail on everything, then in terms of restoration, well, then that's not what this is about. It's not a build, it's not a resto, it's just a resurrection. Think roadkill. only I hope that we're a bit safer. On the subject of nuts and bolts, commenter W Hogdoc pointed out to me that I may not have been 100% accurate in terms of the definition between a screw and a bolt. Happy to have those sort of comments. I can only rely on what I was told as an apprentice or learned throughout my my career working in the industry, and it's always been explained to me that if you have two components that you're wanting to fasten together, if the fastener goes through those components into a third party, so a nut or a captive plate or something else other than the components, that is a bolt. It has to have a nut. Whereas if you were joining components together and one of those components contains the thread that you're winding your fastener into, then that then becomes a screw, because you need to turn the fastener in order to apply the clamping force, and that's where you measure your torque load, etc. Whereas with a bolt, you always leave the bolt fixed and you turn the nut. And in fact, some bolts come with square shanks and what have you not to prevent them turning, so that they force you, take the idiot factor into it, and they force you to have to turn the nut. I stand by that. If there's more information, and if W Hogdoc's got works in the field or is an expert in the field, and he has any further information on that, I'd really be quite grateful for you to put that in the comments, and that way it's a reference for people that like myself, who may be ignorant to that type of thing. So thanks for that comment. Hopefully you can back that up with a little bit more information, because like I said, I'm busy. I don't want to be trolling the internet looking for that kind of information, but I'm happy to receive it. Otherwise, I'll ignorantly go on and just believe that a bolt has a nut and a screw doesn't. Now, on the subject of nuts and bolts, Pete D, thanks mate for popping a comment in about the 1/2-inch torque wrench that I used on everything, because it was in my hand, so let's just use it. But you sort of, those micrometer type ratchet torque wrenches, you're flirting with danger a bit, because at the bottom end of the scale and the top end of the scale, they tend to get a little bit inaccurate, and you can potentially over tension your fastener. And while that didn't contribute to the broken stud that just snapped, it was going to snap anyway, it possibly could have. And I have experienced that in the past. You should use an appropriate size torque wrench and be looking around the middle of the range of that torque wrench for where you want to be operating. The one I should have been using was this, which is a smaller one that I do own. It's right here. I just lazy, I guess. But thanks, Pete. So keep the comments coming. I encourage everybody to read through the comments, because there's lots of different ways that you can do different things. Now, that sort of prompted me to put that warning back at the start of this video, because that disclaimer, I guess, because it is the way I do it. There are many methods, and for example, like how to remove bearing from the bottom of the headstock, or people will have comments on the best way to bleed brakes, etc. And you can read through those and have other options other than what I'm presenting to you, because I'm not here to show you the 10 million ways to skin a cat. I'm just going to do what I do, whether it be right or wrong, and then I welcome anybody that wants to comment or offer alternatives or provide information to you good people out there that are following this GS1000 series. Anyway, that's enough waffle. It's a nice day. I'm going for a ride. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment, and I'll catch you next time on Andy's Motorcycle Obsessions. Bye for now.